We were hit with some unexpected news today from Unexpected Games. They just announced the Mandalorian Adventures. This is a game designed by none other than Corey Konieczka, who has some experience with some Star Wars games.
For sure. Star Wars Rebellion is one of my favorite games of all time. And just from playing that game, you can tell, and I've known Corey for long enough to know that he is a huge Star Wars fan. And he's even said that being able to do this project and come back to the Star Wars world with an IP like The Mandalorian.
Super exciting.
It's so hot right now, not to quote Zoolander, but it is. Mandalorian is so hot right now. Everybody loves The Mandalorian, us included.
Yes.
We've got the Mandalorian Star Wars Unlimited set coming out this year that we're all hyped for.
Don't get Ryan started on that.
And now, of course, the Mandalorian adventure game as well.
Yeah, this is a game now, it should be said, this is not like Star Wars Rebellion, for sure.
For sure.
This
it's an adventure
is a
game.
different sort of game, so we're here to talk to you a little bit about that. With that said, we're going to speculate our hearts out like we do.
It's our favorite thing to do.
It is our favorite thing to do. We've heard from a lot of you. You like doing it along with us, so please get down in the comments below and speculate your guts out.
Yeah.
We've looked at a lot of the images that have been released. We've looked at the trailer. We've stopped it. We've zoomed in, we've enhanced, and we have some things to say. First of all, this is one of those, it's a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players, and it's one of those sort of booklet games. You know, think Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion.
Or like the adventure book series.
Or
like
the adventure book
Princess
series.
Bride and Lord of the Rings.
But it's common, more and more common these days, where you're playing a sort of campaign game where you flip pages in a spiral-bound book, and there's that map. There's maybe some special rules for that map. This looks to be a very puzzly sort of game as well, which I think is fantastic for a co-op game, but there's all the things you'd expect in a Mandalorian game too. There's a lot of combat, but it's all card-driven. You're playing cards underneath the particular page, and it looks like that's going to be potentially somewhat variable, because even the actions that are listed across the bottom of the page, those sort of like go hand in hand with some of the cards that you'll be playing, and each player gets to choose a character. Someone can be the Mandalorian. Of course, everyone's going to be fighting over that.
Maybe.
But there's like, 8
Grief Karga's in there, we know. IG-11. That would be a fun one to play.
8 characters, I think, of what they've announced, and each come with their own deck of cards, and these action cards you're going to be using to do one of a few different actions.
Yeah, and like David said, these actions could change. We don't know, because we've only seen one scenario set up. And that's the thing about this game, if you've put into these storybook games. When you flip that page, everything that you need to run the scenarios on the left side, and then all the different actions. Though it seems to me, again, speculation, we've looked at the cards and we've looked at the actions. And it looks like each card is kind of color-coded with an icon that matches one of the 4 actions that are on the board. So I imagine as you flip those pages, even though maybe what the actions do or their abilities might change,
it looks
the
like
core should stay the same.
It looks like, if I had to guess, I think all of the core actions will always be representative. These are things like move, intel, attack, and plan.
Yep.
And just to give you obviously move lets you move, but it even looks like maybe it'll be a variable amount of movement. And there's also these little tokens that they're placing on top of some of those actions, which made us remember the Initiative, which is another game from Corey that is a completely also very different game. But the card play in the Initiative, you're playing cards underneath actions to take those actions. And there are some rules and regulations for how you play them. In the Initiative, if I play a card, you have to play a card higher.
I believe it's higher.
Higher in value. It's some sort of thing. They have to either escalate or de-escalate in terms of value played, or they can't be played. So, meaning part of the puzzle of the Initiative is if I play a 5 and you have to go higher, everyone else at the table is like, well, I guess we're not using that action anymore until someone does something to sort of wash that space. I don't think this is going to be exactly like that, but given the tokens with values that they placed on them, we wondered whether or not that was like the maximum sum or potentially the cap on the level type of card you can play there. Because you couldn't play a 3 if there's a 2 on the action. It's limited.
And some of the cards had no text and just a number.
Yes.
So it looks like in a lot of the actions would say like there's a little hashtag of like, and that might mean the value. It might mean the number of cards. We don't really know exactly because they don't super show detailed gameplay. They just have a little.
Could be number of cards.
Could be number of cards that's there. So all the cards do have abilities when played to certain slots, but it also looks like maybe you could use them in other slots and forgo the ability.
Yeah,
So a lot of options.
Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but I'd be willing to bet and agree with you that I could use an intel-focused card for an attack, but it's just forcing the player to potentially make that decision of like, I really should use this as an intel, but we need to attack right now. And I think that's part of the puzzle that's going to be at play here, is trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to play our cards? Here's what we want to do. I can play this. And on top of it, I think, what is it, the plan action?
Yeah.
That lets you draw cards from some completely separate deck of smaller cards. I'm assuming these are like many games, kind of like intrigue cards from, what is it, Waterdeep?
Yeah,
you know, where you
Dune,
anything where you get a card
action cards
from Dune.
From any other
you
game,
can do
action
something
cards.
unique and special. They don't seem to be the same cards that you're going to be playing to take your actions, but maybe things that you can play as one-time events that like let you do something.
Yeah, and what David said earlier too, I want to kind of reiterate the idea of this being a tactical game with all of those decisions. It is definitely a puzzle game. So I think adventure games go one of two ways. There's some that are just like very narrative focused. This does not necessarily feel very narrative focused. There's definitely some stuff that's you're reading, but it's not about going from point to point, looking for clues and solving a mystery.
Oh yeah, I don't think there'll be much storytelling.
Right, which in some games, like I said, from the look of it, it kind of reminded me a little bit of Hegemonia or Jaws of the Lion.
Yeah.
With the way it looks, but this is very much like a tactical puzzle game of efficiency of like, let's work together, let's figure out how to solve this puzzle. We have to, use some of these actions to survey the threats. We have to figure out what our objective is. Each scenario seems to have some special rules. The one that we saw was interacting with these blast doors that you have to get open to find Grogu effectively, Baby Yoda.
Probably Grogu. I'm pretty sure that was the mission that they've shown. We have just only a couple pictures, but it looks to be the mission. One thing that had us curious is up in the upper left-hand corner, it said characters. And the characters that it had listed were IG-11 and the Mandalorian.
Which makes sense for that episode.
Yes, it makes sense for that episode, although it seemed like they were working together, which is not exactly what was happening in that one particular episode. By the way, speaking of episodes, this is covering a lot of the storyline from season 1 of Mandalorian. I assume they're leaving open the opportunity to do more content down the road. But in terms of content, the game itself actually has a couple of envelopes too that you'll be opening at some point. There's a whole mission booklet, which I think are probably all the missions. And then at certain points, there may be new rules or new things introduced that kind of like make the players at the table go, oh, whoa, this changes things.
Yeah.
And again, I can't help but imagine Corey's experience doing the initiative is leaking over here as well.
There's
really
a lot of secrets and
there's a lot of crazy stuff that gets introduced where you're like, oh wow, this changes the game now.
Yeah, I mean it's a little different.
I'm sure it'll be different than that.
The initiative is a very cerebral experience. This, and it's also a puzzle game, but a very different kind of puzzle.
Yeah.
Like we keep saying, this is more of a tactical puzzle. To get back to your point, because we didn't quite finish the point that like has us a little curious.
Oh yes.
The fact that we've only seen a 2-player setup. We've seen that first scenario with Mandalorian and IG-11, and it says characters allowed, or characters.
Just as characters.
Lists 2. Whether or not maybe he's blurred out the other characters so that we don't know who else you can play. I don't know, but the game says it plays up to 4. So I don't know what the deal is.
Here's my guess. I could be wrong, but I think those characters that are listed are probably mandatory characters, because if you can still play up to 4, my guess is pick any character, but in this storyline, you have to use IG-11 and Mandalorian at least.
And you don't think there's a situation where you have 2 players drawing from the same deck, controlling the same character?
No, I don't think so.
Because I do wonder if you're going to unlock more characters as you go, or if you're just going to have access to all. It just depends on how strict they're going to be. Because obviously at the start of the show, it was just the Mandalorian, and then big part of the show, if you haven't seen it, is him meeting people along the way and building this makeshift team. So I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know if we're going to get access to more characters as we go.
I do get the sense that you're going to be playing this from point A to point B. It's not like you're just going to open, let's do mission 8 today. It's going to be a start here and play through these missions so that you can at least get a little bit of a narrative
especially because when it comes time to like opening those secret envelopes and stuff like that. And again, we've seen a little bit of what's in those envelopes, and it looks like there's a new rule sheets and maybe some new cards and stuff hiding in those envelopes. So who knows? I mean, that's exciting for me.
I'm all down for envelopes. The one thing, it does have standees.
It does.
I've
and tokens.
Well, that tokens I'm fine with. Standees, I've warmed up to standees a little bit more. People, it seems like they've made a resurgence. Instead of miniatures, people seem to be a little anti-miniatures.
I wish they were acrylic at least.
But I gotta tell
like
you,
standees.
if I had miniatures from another game for these characters, I'd probably use them.
If you're a Legion plus Shatterpoint or Legion or any of those games, you might have them. So hey,
I mean, I don't play those games, but I might seek them out if
just
I get
to have
this
those
game.
miniatures.
And I think this is coming to. They mentioned it later this year. I want to say. I feel like I saw August or something.
But I would be very surprised if this was not a Gen Con. I bet they are gunning to have this released at Gen Con.
I think they're probably trying to have it at Gen Con, and I think the MSRP, don't quote me on this, but the MSRP looked to be $49.99.
I think it said $49.99.
So this is definitely a game more for the masses than, say, Rebellion.
This is something that you could pick up. They would fly off the Target shelves.
I do think that we'll probably see this at mass market chains as
like
well.
Barnes & Noble, Target, like this would do well. I mean, it seems very approachable. It's one of those games that feels, from just our look at it, like it will be pretty easy to teach, and then the difficulty comes in like the strategy, which is something you can get better at as you play.
Yeah, it looked like most of the rules are going to be on the cards in terms of and there's going to be very simple general rules for here's how movement works, here's how attacking works, and it's not going to, I can't imagine it's going to be line of sight and this and that. It's going to be pretty streamlined in that respect. More of a puzzle game.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions about it, or again, if you have any theories, or if you've poured over these images like we have, please get down in the comments below and say, hey guys, you totally missed this. You didn't talk about this.
People always catch stuff. We did a whole video on the Anarchy, and even somebody in there was like, well, actually, I think this might be how it works. And I was like, oh, that's really smart. So hey.
So bring on the speculation with us, and we'll get down there and talk with you about it. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.